Hello, everyone, and welcome back. I'm Gayatri, and today we move into episode 16 within season 3 of Catalyze Your Self, when conditioning overrides our truth. And these conditioned learnings we carry may not only be what we believe, it can also be what our subconscious has stored through repetition. It can be what our nervous system has learned to recognize as familiar. It is what our body has learned to prepare for. It is what our cognition may later interpret, defend, or justify, even after the learned response has already started being expressed to the world. And this is one of the reasons why deepening our awareness of our own conditioning matters so much in the work of strengthening our mind. Because how our conditioning operates is a whole inner world experience. It belongs to all parts of our mind. It belongs to our nervous system. It belongs to our body. It belongs to our subconscious patterns. It belongs to our emotional responses, our interpretations, our behaviors, our choices, and our expression. In this season, we have focused on how we can remain connected to ourself when pressure is present. Pressure in itself is not what creates all of the conditioning we carry. All of our conditionings were already there by the time pressure arrived. They had already formed through our lived experiences, through our relationships, through our environments, through what was rewarded, what was corrected, what was made costly, what was ignored, what brought approval, what preserved belonging, what created consequence, or what helped us remain safe and intact. All pressure is doing is creating conditions that show us where all of our conditioned learnings that do not serve us is still being chosen by us. And this is the focus of today's episode. Today, we will focus on recognizing when a learned response, our conditioning, begins to carry more authority than what our present moment is asking of ourselves. More authority than our conscious awareness, more authority than our discernment, more authority than the collaboration of our cognition, our emotion, our consciousness, our nervous system, and our body, more authority than our inner truth. Our inner truth is one of the core elements that I highlight within self-inspiration from the SIRE model. In the way we have explored SIRE, self-inspiration is the inner reference point that connects us to our values, our beliefs, our purpose, and our inner truth. It is where we remain connected to what matters within us before external expectations, urgency, role that we play, fear, approval, or conditioning can take the lead. So when conditioning overrides our inner truth, what is being overridden is not a passing preference. It is not simply an emotion of the moment. It is not an impulsive want. What is being overridden is the inner reference point that allows our choices to remain connected to our values, our beliefs, our purpose, and what is real within us in the current moment. Recognizing this is important because an unintegrated mind can mistake familiarity for truth. When all parts of our mind are not in conversation, when our cognition, emotion, consciousness, our nervous system, and body are not working together with enough presence, our subconscious can just take over and move first. Our nervous system can choose the path it already knows. Our body can prepare for what has happened before. Our emotion can carry a charge from an old learning. Our cognition can create an explanation that sounds reasonable, and our consciousness may arrive much later, if at all, after the response has already been made. And when that happens enough times, conditioning can begin to shape what gets registered as acceptable, what gets held as possible, what gets recognized as safe, and what even gets treated as true. And this is also why we need to approach our conditioning with care, because many conditioned responses once helped us adapt. They may have helped us remain connected. They may have helped us avoid harm. They may have helped us maintain approval. They may have helped us stay steady in environments that did not make space for our full truth. They may have helped us keep functioning when functioning was required. And this is where the depth of our self-awareness becomes so important. Not as self-analysis, not as self-judgment, simply as our ability to notice how our mind is collaborating and what is leading our responses. Is this response coming from our current moment or from an older pattern that our nervous system is recognizing? Is this choice connected to our self-inspiration, to our values, our beliefs and purpose and our inner truth? Or is it connected to fear of consequence, loss of approval, loss of belonging, or disruption and change? Is our cognition helping us discern or helping us justify a response that has already come out from our subconscious? Is our emotion offering signals from our present moment, or is it carrying an intensity of a memory? Is our body giving information about our present moment or preparing for what has happened once before, many times before? These questions are meant to restore a conversation inside of our mind so we can come to an aligned and integrated response. Because conditioning becomes powerful when it is not recognized as our learnings. And it becomes very powerful when it is simply treated as our reality. When our learned response says, this is just how life works, and we do not pause long enough to ask whether it is still true, when it says, this is just who I am, and we do not ask whether it is who we are or who we became in order to remain safe, accepted, successful, useful, quiet, or safe, when it says this is not possible and we do not ask whether the impossibility is truly our reality or a boundary created by what was never shown to us, modeled to us, welcomed from us, or permitted. When it says this is unsafe and we do not ask whether our nervous system is responding to the present moment or simply recognizing an old pattern. This is why conditioning has to be understood, because if we ignore it or if we judge it too quickly, we turn against part of us that once protected us. And if we obey it without awareness, we continue living from an old learning that may no longer reflect who we are in this moment or serve us best in this current moment. And neither creates integration within our mind. Integration asks us to hold a more honest relationship with what has been learned. To say, this response came from somewhere. This pattern has a history. This body response has intelligence behind it. This nervous system choice is not random. This subconscious association was formed through repetition. And now, with consciousness available, we can ask whether it is still belonging to the current moment, to the role that it has once been given. So our journey is not how do we get rid of our conditioning. It is, where has conditioning been given the authority that belongs to our inner truth? Because our truth does not vanish when conditioning becomes loud. It may become harder to access. It may need more space. It may need our nervous system to settle. It may need cognition to stop defending an old learning. It may need emotion to be heard without becoming the whole response. It may need consciousness to observe what has been moving beneath the surface. And once we understand it in this way, we can begin to see how the strength of our connection to our self-inspiration, our inner truth, and our conscious presence of mind that results in our discernment shapes what gets registered as acceptable, what gets held as possible, what gets recognized as safe, and what is treated as true, what it's treated as reality for us. And our truth is also this: we are all born with the capacity to learn, to adapt, to register, to recognize, and to respond to the world around us. We are born with neuroplasticity, our ability to learn until our last breath. We are also born dependent, relational, and attuned to survive. Before we even understand language, before cognition has developed enough to explain to us what is happening, before our conscious awareness can evaluate meaning, our nervous system and body have always and already been receiving information the moment we have become a living being. Our mind begins learning through tone, through touch, absence, consistency, urgency, gentleness, correction, approval, disapproval. What brings us closeness and connection? What creates distance? What makes us feel abandoned? What receives care? And what creates consequence? This is how conditioning begins. It begins before even the ability to say, this is what I believe. It begins before we can ask, is this true for me? It begins before we can discern whether what we are learning is aligned with who we are or even best for who we are. Our subconscious is receiving repeated experiences. Our nervous system is registering what is familiar. Our body is learning where to soften, where to brace and tighten, when to reach out, when to withdraw, when to stay quiet, when to prepare. And because we are still developing at a certain point of time in our life, we do not evaluate all of this in the way an adult mind with a fully functional prefrontal cortex can. We absorb it, we adapt to it, we learn what helps us remain connected, accepted, cared for, included, protected, safe. A child does not need someone to say, your needs are inconvenient, for their nervous system to begin learning that needing less creates less disruption. A child does not need someone to say your truth will cost belonging, for their body to begin preparing for silence before honesty. A child does not need someone to say you're valued only when you perform, for their subconscious to begin storing performance as their path to approval. A child does not need someone to say, do not disappoint us, for their mind to begin registering disappointment as danger. And this is why so much of our conditioning is not stored as a conscious memory we can easily point to. It is stored as association. It is stored as expectation. It is in our subconscious, and it is stored as a response. And over time, repetition teaches our mind what to anticipate. If honesty repeatedly created conflict, our nervous system may begin recognizing silence as protection or just speaking untruths as protection. If achievement repeatedly brought attention, our subconscious may begin holding accomplishment as the path of being seen. If emotional expression repeatedly created correction, our body may begin preparing to contain emotion before it has even fully moved through us as a signal. If being agreeable repeatedly preserved connection, agreement can become available so much faster than our discernment. And this is why conditioning can carry so much complexity. It may carry love, protection, discipline, culture, devotion, survival, belonging, fear, silence, self-limitation, or even self-abandonment. And most often, it carries more than one thing at the same time. And if conditioning begins before our conscious discernment is fully available, then our growth requires us to bring conscious presence to what was once learned without it. So we can discern if the conditioning we have aligns with our truth today or not. And this is why growth is not only intellectual. Growth is not only the moment we understand what happened or why we responded the way we did. Growth is what our mind, our nervous system, and body begin to learn through repeated conscious participation. And this is also why our relationship with conditioning is so important. If repetition created a learned response that has become our conditioned response, then repetition with conscious presence is also how a new response becomes available and contributes to our growth. When we repeat without awareness, we are strengthening our conditioning, regardless of it being good for us in the moment. When we repeat with conscious presence, our mind receives new evidence. Our subconscious begins to store another possibility. Our nervous system begins to recognize another way to remain connected, steady, and present. Our body begins to prepare differently. Our expression begins to reflect more of who we are now. And this is why we cannot speak about conditioning only as what shaped our old patterns. Conditioning is also how our aligned responses become lived experiences within us. When our subconscious has learned agreement as protection, growth does not only come from saying, I know I am allowed to say no. Yes, that understanding matters, but it is not the complete shift. Growth begins forming when we pause before an automatic yes and allow our cognition and emotion and enter the conversation, give our nervous system space to recognize that a pause is not danger and let our expression reflect what is true for us in the present moment. When our nervous system has learned usefulness as the pathway to approval, growth does not come from only believing that rest is valuable. The new pathway begins forming when we stop overextending, recognize that the old association between usefulness and worth is not relevant for us right now, is not what's best for us right now, and reconnect to our self-inspiration and allow a different choice to be practiced enough that our body no longer treats rest as abandonment of responsibility. And this is why our connection to our inner truth, our self-inspiration matters so deeply, because growth that serves us is not simply to create a different behavior. It is to create a response that is connected to our values, our beliefs, our purpose, and our inner truth. Without self-inspiration, we may only replace one performance with another. We may create a response that looks healthier from the outside while still remain disconnected from what is real within us. We may become more regulated in appearance, more polished in expression, more acceptable in behavior, and still not be aligned within our mind. Every repeated response teaches our mind something. And every time we remain in honest relationship with our cognition, our emotion, our consciousness, our nervous system and body, our mind is learning integration. So the same human capacity that allows for growth can also keep old conditioning active. when our mind is not integrated. And this is why growth that is aligned with our inner truth requires our conscious presence. Without conscious presence, repetition continues, but it may not serve who we are now. Without self-inspiration, repetition may keep us connected to roles and expectations and approvals and protection or familiarity rather than our truth. Without self-regulation, our nervous system may not have enough steadiness to remain with the discomfort of choosing differently. Without self-awareness, we may not recognize that what moved through us was learned. Without self-expression, the truth we recognize may not become visible in our choices. And without self-reflection, we may not see how the same conditioned response kept returning across different parts of our life. So, growth is not separate from conditioning. Growth is the conscious participation in what our mind, our nervous system, and body are learning now. We cannot control every experience that shaped our conditioning in the past. We cannot go back and remove every repetition that taught our nervous system what to protect, avoid, tolerate, or treat as true. However, with conscious presence of mind, we can begin participating in what gets repeated from this moment on. We can begin noticing that learned responses earlier. We can begin questioning whether it still reflects ourselves earlier. We can begin by giving our nervous system new evidence earlier. We can begin letting self-inspiration carry more authority than old fear earlier. We can begin allowing our inner truth to become part of our response before that response gets expressed. And now, as we bring today's episode to a close, I want to return us to the central truth, the core of this conversation. Conditioning is our learned response and our growth pathway. It is what our mind, our nervous system, and body have learned through repetition. It is what our subconscious has stored. It is what our nervous system has recognized as familiar. It is what our body has learned to prepare for. It is what our cognition can end up justifying and explaining and defending. And when our conscious presence of mind is not fully available, these learned responses can begin carrying more authority than the truth of our present self. And this is why the deepening of our awareness of our conditioning matters so much in the work of strengthening our mind. Our conditioning may have helped us adapt once upon a time. It may have helped us remain connected. It may have helped us avoid harm. It may have helped us maintain approval, preserve belonging, stay steady, keep functioning, or remain intact in conditions where our full truth did not have enough space. And because of that, we must approach it with enough honesty to recognize what it is still leading, enough care to understand where it came from, enough conscious presence to ask whether it still belongs in the role it has been given. And this is where our connection to our self-inspiration is so important. Within the SIRE model, self-inspiration is where we remain connected to our values, our beliefs, our purpose, and our inner truth. It is the inner reference point that reminds us of what matters within us before external expectations, urgency, role, fear, approval, our conditionings take the lead. So when our conditioning is overriding our truth, it is overriding these inner reference points of values, beliefs, and purpose and truth. And this is why an unintegrated mind can mistake familiarity for truth. Our nervous system can choose the path that knows best. Emotions can carry the intensity of a memory. Cognition can create an explanation that sounds so reasonable. And conditioning can begin to shape what gets registered as our truth. So we are not asking how to get rid of the conditioning. Conditioning is critical for our growth. What we are asking instead is, where has conditioning been given enough authority that actually belongs to our inner truth? Where has our nervous system been recognizing familiarity as safety, even when our self is asking for something more aligned? Where has our cognition been defending a response that our inner truth has already questioned? And all of this is to simply restore the conversation within our mind that allows us to discern. They bring our cognition back into relationship with our emotion. They bring our body back into relationship with our awareness. They bring our nervous system back into relationship with our present reality. They bring our subconscious learning into our conscious presence. They bring our self-inspiration back to the center of our choices. And this allows for the strengthening of our mind to happen as we begin to include that inner reference points of our truth before any of our responses gets expressed into the world. And that inclusion leads to growth that is aligned with ourself. And now I want to leave all of us with a few reflective considerations. Where in our life do we recognize a learned response moving before our discernment has fully formed? What has our conditioning registered as acceptable that our inner truth may now be questioning? And where have we begun to allow our self-inspiration, our values, our beliefs, our purpose, our inner truth to carry more authority than an old conditioned learning? These reflections are simply meant to help us notice what is leading us ourselves. Because once we can see the conditioning clearly, it no longer has to decide for us unseen. We can honor what helped us remain safe without giving it lifelong authority. We can recognize what was learned without confusing it with what is true in our current moment. We can allow our present self to participate before our conditioning becomes our only choice. And this is where our return to our integrated mind begins. The return to conscious presence, the return to discernment, the return to self-inspiration, the return to our inner truth. And in our next episode, we will move into episode 17, When We Function at Any Cost. We will focus on what happens when our ability to keep going gets separated from our capacity, our relationship with ourselves. I hope today's episode resonated and we stay connected. Please feel free to reach out to me through any of the podcast platforms and share your thoughts and reflections so all of us can continue to grow and learn together. And please do share this episode with anyone you feel would value joining us on this journey. And for those of you who have not yet downloaded my SIRE model, it'll be in the episode description as always. Thank you for joining me today on Catalyze Your Self. I am Gayatri, your host, and I'm so grateful for the space we shared together. Until next time, let us continue strengthening our mind, deepening our conscious presence, and stay grounded in our inner truth of our self-inspiration.